Your podcast is allowed to change as you change as a person. And that's what we're talking about with Krystle Edwards today. She lives in Tacoma, Washington. I met her at a networking event and was just so inspired by the work that she's doing and how she's doing it. So this podcast is great for anyone who wants to, double tap into their podcast, use it throughout multiple series of their life. And just remember, your podcast is allowed to change with you as you change. So let's get into this episode. Welcome to the Podcast Café, where we're serving up everything you need to know about podcasting, from tips, stories, and strategies for podcasters from podcasters. I'm your host, Hayleigh the founder of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast agency helping business owners, creatives, and thought leaders launch and grow their shows. Whether you're just starting out or want to take your podcast to the next level, this is the place for you. Each week, we'll dive into practical tips, actionable strategies, and of course, stories from other podcasters so that you can build up a podcast that you love and that works for your business. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started. Welcome to the Podcast Café. Hey Krystle, welcome into the Podcast Café. I am so excited to be chatting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Hayleigh. I'm really excited to connect and just talk about podcasting.
Yes, and at the time of that we're recording this, you're just 5 weeks postpartum, so congrats on your new baby, and you're just so impressive, back to doing stuff already, I don't know, when I met you, I was impressed by what you did. We met at a local event here in Seattle, and I don't know, we just connected really well at first, and then I was on your podcast. I just love what you're doing and creating.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm 5 weeks postpartum, and I'm not doing a ton, but, I still try to do things that fill my cup, even if it's just a little bit every couple weeks. It kind of helps just to get that little mental break. Yeah, this is a break for me. This is fun for me, so I love it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so my first question for you is, what's your go-to coffee order since we are in the Podcast Cafe?
Okay, so I would say there's two.
Okay.
And I would say it's a sugar-free, dirty vanilla chai, iced or hot, or just like an Americano. Iced or hot, with a little bit of cream and a little bit of sugar, pretty basic, but my dirty chai is sort of my splurge.
Okay, I haven't had a dirty chai in probably years, and my mouth just started salivating, so I think I'm gonna have to go get one of those tomorrow.
Yeah, they're so good. I love them.
They are. I used to love them. I wonder why I stopped ordering them. Interesting. Okay, well, we're here to talk all about your podcast, Gritty is the New Pretty. So you've described Gritty is the New Pretty as a space to normalize real conversations around healing, ambition, and identity. So I'm curious, what was a personal turning point that made you realize that the world needed this podcast?
It's sort of a long story that originates with I won't say it originates with COVID, but COVID is really what led me to say podcasting is a good step for me. And that's because I had started Grit City Women in 2019. And that was a space where I wanted to kind of create an opportunity for women to network and connect small business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs based off my own personal journey that I had in starting a nonprofit that was in honor of my best friend who was killed in an avalanche. And during that time, I had no experience in that world. I was working actually in a male-dominated military industry, so it was totally not like my 9-to-5, right? And during the nonprofit process, I felt really alone. I felt like I didn't know who I could turn to for questions, and I felt not very confident in some of the decisions. And I'm, writing letters to donors, I'm building websites. I was doing all this stuff, and I really felt like I wanted that connection and mentorship with other women. And so that's why I started Grit City Women. And we were doing in-person events for Grit City Women monthly. And I was bringing speakers every month, and it had a lot of momentum behind it and was really taking off. And then in 2020, COVID came along and everything shut down. And we did pivot to kind of virtual monthly events, but it wasn't the same. And the energy wasn't there. And I was just like, you know what, this isn't really true to the brand. And I don't want to do I don't want to do virtual events right now because it's just such a weird pivot in a weird time. And so we put those on hold and put memberships on hold. But I did recognize that even for myself, that I still wanted to provide an opportunity to uplift some of the women in our community that are doing really great things, to share these stories that can, you know, help other women either be inspired, empower them, or educate them. And so that's where I was like, the podcast platform is a way that I could do that, where I'm not having these virtual events where some people show up, some people don't show up. It feels really weird. It doesn't feel the same as it did before. And it's really just, you can listen on your own time. And so that's why I started Gritty is the New Pretty. And it was originally, I had it called Grit and Grind is what I started. And I rebranded to Gritty is the New Pretty because I just started to really feel that slogan was resonating more with me and with the brand.
Yeah. How'd you come up with Gritty is the New Pretty?
It really came when I started Grit City Women. It came to me very shortly after I think I decided on the name Grit City Women. Mm-hmm. And it, you know, in Tacoma, it's called Grit City is its nickname. So now there's like Grit City Bakery. Everything has Grit City in it. At that time, I don't think it was just kind of starting. The Grit City name was starting. It kind of just came to me and I put it on our t-shirts. And so when I would go to the markets, I'd go to the night markets or any sort of outdoor market and sell my merch. Women loved it. They loved the Grit City Women title just to start, but like the Gritty is the New Pretty started. I realized that was really resonating with women and they loved it. They're like, yeah, this is awesome. So I decided that I really need to embrace that. And that it does like resonate with me, and I want to build that more into the Grit City Women brand.
Yeah. So with it being during COVID, a lot of podcasts were launching at that time. What was your launch process like? I know you already had like probably an email list from people who were, you know, going to your events, and I think that's great because I know a lot of people who want to start podcasts or have them, like, have different ways that they can reach their audience, but we don't always think of them first. So how'd you launch?
It was so long ago. I don't entirely remember, but I think I just spent a lot of time figuring out how to do it. And then sharing it on my social media platform and sending an email out and just kind of putting it out into the universe. And I don't think back then I didn't really know like if it was going to go on forever. I don't think I really had expectations or a ton of goals, except for as a way to keep connected with my network and with the women that were a part of Grit City Women. So honestly, I just kind of went for it, and I don't think I thought too much. I didn't think it through. I'm going to be honest.
That's okay. I feel like that leads into like my next question of like, with the term gritty, was there a moment in your life or the podcast, which you might have just answered, where you chose grit over perfection? And like, how do you continue to do that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can tell you in the early, when it was Grit and Grind, some of the software that I was using was tricky. And the learning curve on it was so hard. And, you know, if you've got an edited episode and you lose it, it's like
killer.
Oh man, it's like you just got to go walk or do something. The rage that you feel is unlike any other. So I think that was hard. Is I found that I was spending so much time editing all the little like I just did, and I was doing a lot of editing, and I think that I was pushing through for a while, and it was good. The product was good at the end, but then at some point I also was like, this is how we talk normally in America and in the English language, and we're not perfect robots all the time. And so then I sort of allowed myself to not edit to like the extreme perfection that I was editing. So I guess it kind of went really one way to the extreme of perfection to I was a little more laid back of allowing some sounds and some mistakes to be in there within reason.
Yeah, and now there's a lot of AI tools that will like clean up the audio, like clean up all the ums and you knows and all of those. And while I do think there is benefit in having that, it also doesn't always equate to a good product.
Yes.
So I always note that when someone is like, oh, I'm just going to use like AI to edit my podcast. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's AI things that you can use to make it easier on yourself, but the reason I say don't do that is because it does take out that human element. So
it's weird.
Yeah, and I think people notice when it's an AI edited podcast.
I've done it a few times with my clips with Zencastr, and I can tell it cuts the clip just short of being really where I would line it up at.
Yeah.
And so I agree. I think that it's not a good enough tool right now because it's still pretty new, at least for podcasting as far as I know. I mean, because we're talking 2019 when I started, this didn't exist for my editing, right? I've noticed that it makes it choppy. It makes it glitchy in a way, at least through Zencastr. So I agree. I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of work around it where I can use it to my benefit, but also still keep the quality that I want in there.
Absolutely. And I know you do your own podcast production. So I'm curious, what part of the behind the scenes has surprised you the most, like good or bad?
I think, honestly, the amount of work it is. I didn't know getting into it how much work it would be. I think it's gotten easier with the software platforms becoming more user friendly. There's more options out there. I mean, I've seen it evolve from when I first started, and I really love what it's offering me. But even then, it's still work, even with the tools, because if you're a podcast that has guests come on, now you're adding another element of scheduling and let's talk about what we're going to talk about or, discuss in the podcast. So there is work beyond the editing. There's coordination with your guests. There's strategy if you have a specific goal in mind for your podcast. If you're looking to do sales, like we've discussed when you were on Gritty is the New Pretty, I mean, you have to start thinking about those things. So it's not just you hit, record and that's it. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting your time unless you have a lot of time to just kind of do that.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of the podcast process?
I love sitting down with guests.
Yeah.
I haven't recorded a solo podcast and I'm going to soon. It's a goal of mine. But because it was a voice for Grit City women, I've always had a guest on, and it is my favorite part because I feel like I learned so much from all of my guests. Every guest that I have, I learn, and then I also just get a little energized and inspired after each conversation. So I'm kind of it's like my own virtual classroom of one-on-one time with a woman who's doing great things in small business or leadership or entrepreneurship. So that's my favorite.
Yeah, no, it's my favorite too. I'm a chatter, so I love talking, but I also like the fact that you get to ask anyone anything on a podcast, and within reason, they're open to it, right? So I think it's better than going to get coffee with someone or even that is okay, but Zoom calls, lately I've been trying to get more out there in the local area, and so it's so fun to be able to meet someone at a networking event or through someone and then inviting them on your show and having a deeper conversation. I love it. So when you're looking for guests, I know that you had the guests that you had at Grit City Women, but when you're sourcing guests for Gritty is the New Pretty, what is your strategy there?
Well, initially, because it was a voice for Grit City women, I was really focusing on my membership. So members, maybe that had turning points in their business or things that would be learning opportunities for others, I would invite on and focus on them. But when 2020 hit, and then it kind of kept going, the restrictions kept going for, gosh, what? Did they stop in 2022? I don't even remember now.
Yeah, it was a long time, especially here in Washington.
Well, yeah, and I think the last thing was I was going to relaunch, and then the Delta variant was circulating, and, I was like, oh my gosh, here we go again. So I stopped all memberships at that point. And so that wasn't really a space then where I was kind of pulling speakers from. However, I still had a lot of these women in my network and other women in the network that I would pull from. And so if I hear of someone's story or maybe a current event in their life where I'm like, hey, like, would you want to share that with Grit City women and tell your story? I would choose them. And I've also done some guests that were women that have helped me. So for example, one of the episodes I have Dr. Winner, who is a, minimally invasive gynecologic surgeon. And I had a fibroid the size of a cantaloupe that I was diagnosed with just before COVID hit, and was trying to preserve my fertility, and was told by a surgeon that she could give me a hysterectomy, but she doesn't think she could save my uterus. And I ended up finding Dr. Winner. And so it's this story of women's health and how there's still not a lot of advocacy out there for surgeons becoming experts in these techniques that Dr. Winner can, where she could save my uterus and patch me up to where I could go on to have 2 children now. So I wanted to bring that story and her expertise to the podcast to help women. And I've actually had multiple women reach out to me from listening to the podcast, because she posts the podcast on her website, which is an opportunity for women that are going through a similar experience to listen to my story. And they reach out to me and tell me how it's helped them, because they were scared. They've never had surgery. I had one gal, she was petrified of having the surgery, and she didn't even know she wanted to do it. And I spoke to her on the phone. I ended up speaking to her on the phone. And, obviously I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving medical advice, but I'm able to share my experience so they know what to expect, and, just tell the truth. Like, here's what I dealt with, but I can tell you I don't have regrets, Yeah. So that's one variation of it. It's not necessarily sticking to like the leadership entrepreneurs, even though Dr. Winner is obviously a leader and an innovator in the medical industry. It's a little bit outside of my normal network, but I was like, this is important. And I want to share this with women as much as we can. And so I still get, that podcast still gets listens. I still get feedback on it. I still get women reaching out to me. So anytime I come across a situation from my own experience that I want to share, and I'll use my story, I will step outside of kind of that normal realm of guest speakers on the podcast.
Yeah, I love having that openness too, and telling your story and creating that community is, I think, what we all strive for. So thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah.
A cantaloupe is crazy. Wow. So
it's wild, and it's happens. Like, and it's the crazy thing about it, I didn't know until I had episode 3, where I had Dr. Mandy Murtaugh on Gritty is the New Pretty, and she is a women's health physical therapist. So she was a Grit City Women member, and we were talking about women's health and all these things. And I realized after recording and during editing that I had symptoms of something not being right. And I had this bulge that I thought was stubborn belly fat. And back then I was really fit. And I messaged her and I had said, hey, like, I have these symptoms. And she's like, you need to get a pelvic ultrasound. And so I went to the doctor, and the second time I went to the doctor, the first time they just gave me birth control. And then the second time I said, I think I need an ultrasound. I'm really concerned about this. And she gave it to me, and I was shocked that this was the thing that was inside of me, and it was huge. And the impact that it was probably having for years, that I wasn't even realizing, because you just get so used to dealing with the symptoms.
Yeah. And I think this is the reason why you should have a podcast and like share these stories, because there's a lot in, whether it is women's health or business or whatever it is, there's a lot of things that are normalized or stigmatized. We don't want to talk about it. So opening up your platform for women to share their stories and having, you know, the willingness to highlight different people in different industries, I think that is incredible. Look at that. Like, Gritty is the new pretty.
Yep.
Changing your life. Health-wise and business.
You never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolate.
No, I really, thank you so much for sharing that story. I'm curious, how do you want women to feel after listening to the episodes? Keeping in mind that you do cover different topics.
You know, I sort of waver on that. I guess if I were to think of really try to narrow down what I want women to walk away with, and I would narrow it down to 3 things. I would say I want them to feel empowered, or educated, like I've learned something today, or feel like they're not alone. You know, feel like there's hope, or, you know, that things can be different for them. In some way, I'd love them to just be impacted with it, or inspired and energized to just move forward with a vision that they've had. So I guess it just kind of depends on the episode and whoever's listening on how they take away the information that they're getting. Some episodes may not resonate with every listener. Some may really hit the nail on the head, you know. And I think one thing that I realized is when I started my Instagram account, I was sharing little tidbits of little one-liners of advice, that just things that were happening in real time in my life. And those were like so well received. And I feel like Gritty is the New Pretty is sort of an amplified version of those posts, right? Where I'm sort of aligning with what's in my orbit and what's also happening in my life to what I'm bringing to this platform, and just going into it into more detail. And so I think that it's working. I mean, I hope it is. But that's just kind of how I'm rolling with it.
Yeah. And I think it's important to point out that you've had this podcast for the past 5 years, and it's shifted with you through, you know, a pandemic and having 2 kids now, having events versus not having events. How have you kept the podcast like transitioning through life with you?
Yeah, I've actually had to pause it a few times because I was going through whatever transition in my personal life, especially becoming a mom was a huge transition. I got married in 2020 during the pandemic, and of course everything was crazy. And my husband and we sold 2 houses and bought a house in like 5 months, which is a lot of work if you've ever sold and bought a house. And we also got married, and then, you know, we had a baby. So I had a lot of big change happening. And I got change fatigue and sort of burnt out. And I was like, I have to stop everything, you know, for a while to really adjust to this new life that I had that really hit me fast, of just being married. And now my body's changing with my first pregnancy. I've had my fibroid surgery, lots of things going on. And so I paused multiple times to give myself space, and knowing that I can continue to pick it up wherever I've left off. I think as now I become more seasoned in it, and that I think that the vision will still be the same, and the mission will still be the same, is to uplift women's voices and empower others. It's going to be the same. Focus on Gritty is the New Pretty, right? That slogan. But I think it will become slightly more strategic in a way as my business changes. And I really think that that's where Gritty is the New Pretty becomes the platform for my business services, whether I do start Grit City Women back up again, or I move forward focusing on individual development coaching, or executive leadership coaching, change management coaching, or even corporate coaching. So it's possible that I may move like in a different direction, but I really don't think it'll change too much from bringing women on and having some of the conversations about their stories, because I think that is so important. And of course, I bring on guests that align with any of those topics.
Yeah. I love what you said of the mission doesn't change, but the strategy might. That I think everyone needs to hear, because just because you start one podcast doesn't mean it has to be that same podcast forever. I see a lot of business owners who then become moms. Like, obviously their life changes, and so does the content that they're creating, and maybe even the audience that they're helping. That doesn't mean that the last episodes weren't still valuable. Like, everyone could go listen to those. It's just, you know, as it changes, you do have that flexibility to keep the changes coming with it.
Absolutely. I did a little market research while I've been nursing my son, and I watched the Hulu series on Alex Cooper from Call Her Daddy. Have you seen it?
I haven't, but
watch it.
Yeah.
That is exactly what happened. And I've never listened to Call Her Daddy at all, but I watched it, and that is really what happened. And initially, Alex and her friends started the podcast out, and they were talking a lot about sex and, like, you know, normalizing women's voices and sex and, like, locker room talk and etc. And so they built a big following around that. And then I think also when the pandemic hit and she moved home is when she started being more vulnerable and talking about other things and changing the voice, even the voice. She says about, like, how she talked about sex in different ways from the original episodes changed and pivoted. So that's a very prime example of a very successful podcast, where I'd say that's probably, she got the following from the shock factor, but then I think she built a connection from when she became her authentic self.
Absolutely. No, I love her podcast. I actually used to listen years and years ago when it was like her and Sophia just saying crazy things, and I was in college at the time, so I was like, oh my god, this is so funny. And now that she's had, like, Kamala Harris on, like, what a shift that is. And I love
from talking about dicks to interviewing the vice president.
Exactly. Like, did anyone expect that? No, but, like, we love that, honestly. Like,
it's wild, really, but cool. That shows you the power of the voice in podcast, and that you really don't know. Like I said, I don't know the direction that Gritty is the New Pretty will be going, you know. Just kind of rolling with the punches.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see where it does go. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I have a few rapid fire questions for you that we can get into.
Sounds good.
So my first one is, what is your favorite podcast streaming platform?
I used to listen to them a lot more, and I don't. I would say that Apple seems to be the most popular for my listeners that listen to me. I noticed that most of them are Apple listeners. But I honestly, I'm going to say it, I am not listening to any podcasts right now, or any audiobooks. And I think that's really weird, because I used to listen to a ton of them, and I have a lot of them. The time that I do have to myself where I can listen to something, I'm listening to music to try, like, I like to get hyped up. Like, I'm, you know, like, I'm going on a walk and I want to listen to music, and kind of let some, I don't know, like, let some energy out in that way. I don't feel like I have, like, the fortitude to focus on listening to people talk right now, which
no, that's fair.
That's not like my usual state, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Did you used to listen to a lot of podcasts?
I've listened to a couple, and sometimes I'll search out episodes. So, here's an example, is my husband's a first responder, and so that comes with its own unique challenges for families and marriages. And there is a podcast called Dear Chiefs, which was started by two firewives, and they've gotten pretty big, but they talk about a lot of first responder issues. And I thought that was great, so I listened to some of their episodes if I'm looking for insight or information on, you know, navigating my own first responder relationships. So that's something that I've listened to, and I'll seek out specific information in podcasts for certain things here and there.
Yeah, I do the
Very
same
tactical.
thing.
Yeah,
I do the same thing. And I think that's why SEO is so important, the way you title your podcast episodes. But I think that's also important for people to remember for having like the diversity in their podcast of different episodes. So that goes back to you having, I know you interviewed your therapist. I love that episode. You've interviewed your doctor. You've interviewed you know, me, and we're
I know,
all
which is
different.
weird because, you know, I'm like, I don't know if this is like HIPAA or whatever, but for me, I'm willing to share it because I want someone to learn about it. If we don't talk about it, they're not going to learn. So if we don't talk about, you know, fibroids and like how crappy that was and how I didn't know, you know, or talk about, you know, how hard it is dating and like me actually seeking out a dating coach and a marriage counselor to help me get on track. Like that's, to me, that's weird. Like most people don't do that. But if I want something, I'm not beyond getting help or paying someone to help me get what I want and learn. And I know it's a journey. I know I'm not perfect. And I know that there's a lot of things that I can work on. And sometimes I need some help. And so I'll bring them on the show. And yeah, it might be strange, but here we are.
No, I love it. I love it. Not strange at all. I mean, not everyone asks for help. So that's great that, you know, like you're the person in the room, like raising their hand and everyone gets the answer. I think that there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah.
Do you have any podcast listening or production pet peeves?
Poor internet connection. I think that's probably like my biggest pet peeve is if I'm going to have a guest on. And it's not even a pet peeve. Obviously, it's not intentional when it happens. But I think there are some times when you have a guest on, they might not be as tech savvy as we are, right? Especially if we're on the back end of doing the production. So I think it's really important to make things clear about how they can prepare to come to the podcast to where you get a good outcome, because it is really hard when there's background noise that's really interfering or there's a poor internet connection. Then you're sort of stuck. If you do your own editing, you're stuck with that editing bill and it's going to take you twice as long than if I'm interviewing or having you on, right? Because you know all the things, you've got all this stuff set up, you know how it rolls. But there are people that are very, very savvy in their industry that I bring on, and it's not the tech or it's not podcast recording, and it can be a challenge. So I think my biggest pet peeve, without you know, blaming any of the guests because it's not their fault, is just, you know, when you put the time in and you have this amazing conversation, but the lighting is really poor or the sound is hard and it's just, you didn't either prepare them enough or they kind of didn't get prepared enough. I think that's kind of the biggest pet peeve for me. So I really try in all of my planning leading up to like highlight and bold, make sure you have a good internet connection, these things. I mean, I've had to record episodes twice a couple times, which is super unfortunate, but it you know, I'm always grateful for their willingness to do it twice, and it usually ends up better, I guess. Yeah,
no, that's what I love most about being the host of Podcast Café is I'm talking to podcasters, so you guys are prepared.
Yeah, that was smart.
I'm like, my other podcast, Employee to Boss, I've definitely had experiences where like people show up with just on their phone and I'm like, how are we supposed to do this, you know? And so
yeah, because that's how they operate in their world, right? Because they're busy, they're on the go, and jumping on a quick call for them, that's adequate. They just don't know, and that's not their fault, right? And
exactly.
I would say my other pet peeve is if people read from a script. I think I've had a couple people do that, and one ended up being quite long, and it was, I think, I think when I looked at it through editing, it was like 5 or 6 minutes where this person was just kind of reading or talking, and it wasn't really a conversation. And then when they were done, I was sort of like, wow, I didn't know like where to start from that sort of monologue. And so I think coming somewhat prepared with either talking points or questions and answers so the guests can feel that they don't need to read from the script, and maybe even saying we prefer that you don't read from a script, because I just felt like it sounded strange, right? Because you can tell when someone's reading, unless you're a trained actor and you're like super good at it, like you can just tell when someone's reading a script. It doesn't feel organic.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. No, that's a really good one to point out. So what is one piece of advice you'd like to leave all podcasters with?
Well, I think we just talked a little bit about some of the preparation. I think it's always hard when you say one piece of advice.
Or as many as you want. We'll take them all.
I think with anything, understanding what you want to get out of it. Like your why are you doing this? And that could be very niche. It could be very big. I think for me, Grit City Women, Gritty is the New Pretty, that started very big and very vague, and it still is in some ways, but we do have some focus on women and empowerment, and Gritty is the New Pretty. Mm-hmm. So understanding that and working towards that, because it is so much effort and it is a lot of work, and you might be investing, if you are paying a production team, you are putting resources towards it. I would say make sure you understand why you're doing it and what you want to get out of it. The second thing I'd say is work on streamlining the process in whatever way possible. Like if it is doing a platform like I do, Zencaster, and then I don't know what Squadcast like you're on right now. I think those are very helpful platforms. And then also streamlining your scheduling. I noticed that I was spending so much time scheduling guests because I have a full-time job on top of Gritty is the New Pretty, and then other people have the work that they're doing, and they're very busy, important women. And so getting aligned on just picking a day and a time, I was spending way too much effort on that. And I was like, this is too much time for both of us to be figuring out. So I started using the Calendly. I don't even know. Calendly sounds weird. So I started using that by narrowing down when I'm available and saying, hey, here's the time frame that I'm looking to do the recording on this month or the end of this month or beginning of this month, so I can space them out enough for me to keep up with the editing. Totally. And then I let them pick a date works for them. And I'm like, if you can't find one in this month, go to the next month. And then I sort of have them backfilled. So, I mean, I have podcasts scheduled out to September. And I think I have some more in the queue that I need to get scheduled. So I think streamlining the processes as much as possible, unless like this is like your full-time gig, 100% of your time podcasting, and you don't have other job or business to run, I would say those things up front will make it easier for you to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, that's great advice. Calendly is a great tool for scheduling. Mm-hmm. I would never recommend like manually scheduling with everyone, so Calendly is great. I use Subsato. They have like a schedule in there, so there's options, but Calendly is what I started using at first, and it was great. It sends reminders, it does everything.
And there's new stuff out there all the time that has better options, so you might change that. I might change from Calendly to something else, to the one you're using now, and that I know about it. I mean, you don't know, but I think just being prepared to pivot to different tools and resources to keep up is just going to be way easier on you, and your head's not going to spin as much. 100%.
100%. Mm-hmm. So last question for you, Krystle. What has podcasting taught you about yourself?
I mean, I think it would teach me that I really do embody the phrase gritty is the new pretty. I think I've talked about this before when you were on Gritty is the New Pretty is I don't know if like my podcast is any good, or I don't know if people really listen. I mean, I know people listen, but you know, obviously it's not a hugely listened to nationwide podcast, but I keep doing it. And even if I have to take space and time for myself, I still come back and show up because I think it's important and I love doing it. And so I really embody that grit and that I am able to use my voice and not be scared, because it is sort of terrifying, especially in today's world, right? Putting your voice out there, and not just like the sound of your voice, but you know what you're saying and the messaging in a way that's raw, that's unfiltered. It's not perfect, not polished, you know, it's not painless. Like we're talking about, you know, difficult things sometimes on the podcast, and not fearing that vulnerability or those repercussions, or because there's like somebody could pull something up and, you know, all of a sudden there's this negative viral post about you. I mean, I feel like there's just that fear that is out there, and you know, it's something that I overcome every time I get on a podcast or I put a recording out there, where I'm just like, YOLO, you know, like I'm gonna say it and I'm not gonna be scared of what people are gonna think about me or my guests.
Yeah no, I think that is really important to mention. And I know someone on Love Island just got kicked off because of a podcast they did like years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Things get resurfaced. And okay, they did say something racist. So like, should they be kicked off? Yes, absolutely. But, you know, I think it is important to always watch what you say, make sure that you truly do believe in what you say. There's a lot of people out there that just like can get a microphone and talk about whatever they want.
Well,
right. And, you know,
I feel like it's kind of sad. I mean, yes, people should be accountable for sometimes what they say and obviously their behaviors, but people have the right to grow and to learn. And it feels like that in today's world, right? Like if, let's just say that person said that thing and maybe they're an entirely different person and they realize like that's not something I would ever say now, right? Or do now. Do they deserve to be punished for the rest of their lives for that? And I think that's where right now we don't live in a society where people, at least I feel like that people really have the opportunity to grow and be forgiven, because we have this thing of like, oh, 20 years ago you did this, and now any opportunity for you to be public facing is ruined. And to me, that's a little scary, because I don't think anyone's perfect. And I know nobody's perfect. And I know that people make mistakes, and I make mistakes. And I think that's kind of sad. And that's one thing that, you know, hopefully that can change over time, is that people can learn and grow and not have this thing over their heads for their entire lives, you know, if it's something somewhat minor, right? Like, it is what it is.
Krystle, thank you so much for joining me in the Podcast Cafe. The link to Gritty is the New Pretty will be in the show notes, but where else can people connect with you?
Oh, they can connect with me on our Instagram at Grit City Women. Or you can visit our website at gritcitywomen.com. We also have a Gritty is the New Pretty Instagram, but I'm primarily on the Grit City Women Instagram.
Amazing. Okay, well, I can't wait for this episode to go live. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hayleigh. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me in the Podcast Cafe. I hope you're leaving with fresh ideas and inspiration to take your podcast to the next level. Remember, podcasting is a journey and you don't have to do it alone. I'm here to help you every step of the way. Let's connect. Be sure you follow me on Instagram at Espresso Podcast Production, or visit espressopodcastproduction.com for more tips, resources, and behind the scenes insights. I'd love to hear about your podcasting journey. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling extra generous, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more podcasters just like you find the show. Until next time, grab your coffee, keep creating, and I'll see you back here in the Podcast Café.